Welcome back to the TowerCast podcast, the towering podcast with the towering filmmaker of El Paso and the world. We are at the Las Cruces International Film Festival, and it's been great. And we've been able to deliver a lot of episodes to you guys because we've been talking to a lot of awesome filmmakers. And our special guest that we're going to get ready to introduce is definitely nothing short of that. He's been in this industry a long time, has a lot of knowledge to bring to us and give us some perspective on his end. Before I introduce him, however, I got to introduce my fellow co-host, Mr. John Eric Castro.
How you guys doing? I'm going to give you the acting perspective and hopefully ask them some good acting questions.
Mr. Michael Dello.
Hello again. Still here at the Las Cruces Film Festival. I mean, it's just
How have you guys been feeling, you know?
It's been great. I mean, being able to talk to amazing guests this whole time has just been fantastic.
Yeah. We have a very special guest who, as I mentioned, has been doing this a long time and has been able to make just some great pictures and stories that he's been able to tell. And we're going to get into some of those films. We have the very, very awesome Kevin Reynolds on the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for asking me.
Yeah. So you're here, Las Cruces International. How's it been thus far?
Well, it's been kind of a whirlwind. I just got here last night, so I just did a panel, and we were doing a screening tonight, and then I go back tomorrow. So how's
it talking to these fellow kind of filmmakers, film enthusiasts on your end?
You know, I actually like it because it reminds me of why I do the things I do. Mm-hmm. You know, when students ask questions and all, and you answer them, and I remember being out there in the audience like they were, and so it I don't know, it's fun to remember all that.
We're gonna get into that because the biggest question we kind of kick off the podcast with our special guests is, how did you start your storytelling journey? How did that begin for you? What made you want to become a storyteller?
You know, ever since I was a kid, I love stories, and I really like to write. I started writing little stories when I was about 12 years old. Always liked to write. And then I kind of took a detour after college. I had a history degree because I loved history.
We're on the same boat. I actually have a history degree as well.
Well, here's what happened to me. I realized I got a history degree. How am I going to make a living with a history degree? So I went to law school.
Yeah. That was going to be my next step before I became a filmmaker.
All right, you can learn from me. So I went to law school. Didn't like it. I got out and I practiced law. I was in Austin practicing for about 2 years. And really didn't like it. But at night, because I was in Austin, UT had this amazing facility, UT Film School.
Are you from Austin originally?
No, my family's from Texas.
Okay.
But my family mostly lived in Waco. But I always wanted to go down and live in Austin. So to get to live in Austin was just fantastic.
Yeah.
And so I started taking night classes at UT Film School, making movies at night. So I was working all day, and then I'd go run, and then I would eat something, go over to the film school, and I'd stay there till midnight. Wow. Working on little movies. And I did that for about, I don't know, a year or so, and realized I got to make a choice. I can't do this. So what I really wanted to do was go to USC Film School, because that was like sort of the legendary place.
Yeah.
And the guy who was my advisor at UT was Ed Dimitrick, who was one of the Hollywood 10 back in the 50s. Great guy. And he wrote me a letter of introduction, and I went out to LA and met him, and I applied to USC Film School, and I got accepted. Wow. And the next day I quit my job and moved to LA.
Wow.
Which was insane.
Now, did you have any alumni, because USC is this massive place, any notable alumni that you were just, he was just another one of the guys at school, and, you know.
You mean, do I know any of the others?
Yeah, anybody that you kind of crossed paths with that you were like, oh, this is...
There were a few. It was interesting. Most of the guys in my class didn't really end up being directors. They moved into like sound or editing and things like that.
So you were the one. You were the one that went into directing.
One guy, Al Magnoli, he did Purple Rain with Reds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he did. And Al was there at the same time. But otherwise, there's always somebody each year, it seems, comes out and becomes a filmmaker and stuff. But that was the thing about SC is, not everybody became a director. A lot of people went into other fields that were film related.
So you said you started at 12 writing. During those years, did you ever have to put yourself on the screen to
Did I put myself on screen?
Yeah, try the acting game.
I did that briefly when I was like a freshman. I actually went to Trinity University briefly in San Antonio.
Oh, okay.
Because it was a big drama school.
Yeah.
And after taking like one drama class, I realized I have no business trying to be an actor.
That's not your
I
thing.
belong behind the camera.
Most
not in front
directors
of-
go to
I
that,
can't,
right?
I can't bear myself like actors can. you
But
know?
did it give you a little appreciation? Like, okay, actors have a
little more
different-
respect.
Well,
for-
it did, but it's also I don't know. I don't know how actors do it. It's just how do you bear yourself in front of a camera or on
Be
stage?
vulnerable, yeah.
It's just I'm too closed up to be able to do that. So yeah, I very quickly realized that no, I'm not an actor.
Okay, and then was there like a movie that you saw that got you into writing?
That what?
Like at 12 or something? Did you
Was
see a
there-
movie?
Yeah, that inspired me.
Yeah, inspired me.
If I go back and I think of like the seminal picture that
Mhm.
really sort of blew me away.
Give it to us. What is it?
I was 13 years old. Dr. Zhivago.
Dr.
Wow.
Zhivago. Wow.
I mean, I was a huge David Lean freak.
Uh-huh,
I saw Zhivago, and then I went back and I saw Bridge on the River Kwai,
Of course.
Yes.
Marlon Brando.
and
Yeah.
then I saw Lawrence of Arabia.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Of course.
And we were just talking about it. And the thing that I loved about Lean was he could take these amazing personal stories, character-driven stories, but he did it against these huge backdrops.
Right.
And it was just fantastic. That just sucked me in.
That-
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
really-
Very John Ford kind
Yes.
of aspect as
Yes.
well. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. So moving to LA, this is what every storyteller thinks, every actor, every director. We think we're going to move to LA and it's going to change our lives. What was that transition like for you to say, well, I'm in film school and I'm getting this done and I'm doing this, but naturally you go through graduation, you finish what you need to do, and then you get hopefully a first gig, but that's not always how it goes. What was that transition to Los Angeles?
When I first moved out there, it was kind of terrifying. Because it was just I'd never lived in a place like that before. I mean, like I said, I used to live in Holloman Air Force Base, and then after that, I'd gone to school in Texas.
Right.
And Austin was a bigger city, but then to go to LA is just like another planet.
Right.
But you adapt and you persevere and you get through it. And I went to film school for 2 years. My goal was to finish when I got out of film school was to have a script that I could sell and a movie that I could show people. And I did. And I got really lucky.
What was each of those? What was the movie you finished and what was the script?
My thesis screenplay was the movie that became Red Dawn.
Wow.
And
Really?
yeah, it was a different animal than what ended up on the screen because John Milius rewrote it. But,
Yeah.
and,
Did you get to work with John on this?
we tried. It was like a little too jingoistic.
Because he's quite a bit of a character, John Milius.
Yeah, I mean, I went and sat in his office and argued with him about what he'd done to the script. But at that point,
and he probably had a gun at the table.
he did.
Did he
had a
really?
gun- He had a gun
called
on
it.
the desk.
Wow.
He had a
Very
gun on
John
the desk.
Milius thing to do.
Yeah. And he directed it his way.
Sure.
But it was a whole.
Were you on set at all? No.
I
You decided.
I did not like. I mean, I'm just being honest here.
No, please.
Yeah,
This is yeah.
It was a little too jingoistic for me.
Okay, yeah.
So
Understand.
I wanted to. My version was more like Lord of the Flies.
Sure. Okay.
That would have been interesting.
But anyway,
Now, just because we're on the same topic, is with the remake, did that
I had nothing to do with that.
nothing to do with that?
Nothing to
And
do
did you
with
like it? Did it feel?
I didn't even see it.
You didn't even see it. Okay.
No.
Fair enough.
I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. So bringing it back to that was your screenplay. But what about the film that you produced?
I
during
had
your-
this film, and off the screenplay, I got an agent,
Oh, awesome. Okay.
and so
What was the agency?
William Morris.
William Morris. Wow. Right off the bat,
So
William Morris.
what I didn't know is I only knew one guy there who had gotten some scripts from when I was a TA and teaching assistant in
Okay.
the writing department at SC. And so I would call him to get scripts, and so he sent me scripts. So I called this guy and I go, "Hey, I need an agent." He goes, "Well, I'm an agent." I go, "Really?"
Was he at the mailroom or was he actually an agent?
He had started that week as an
Oh,
agent.
As an
They
agent,
had promoted
okay.
him. They had promoted him that week from mailroom to agent.
Wow. Okay.
I was his first
It
client.
can happen.
And then today it's Mike Simpson, who he represents Tarantino.
Oh, wow. That's your agent right now.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he's always the only agent I've ever had.
Mm.
And he sent the script through William Morris to
Okay.
Spielberg.
Wow.
Not the script, I'm sorry. He sent my film.
Your film. Okay.
Sent my film. And the next week I was still at SC, and I'm out in the quadrangle. Mort Zarkov, the chairman, comes out of his office and he goes, "Come here." So I go in his office and he puts his arm around and he goes, "Steven Spielberg's office on the phone." I'm like, "Huh?" So I get on the phone and it was
Was it Kathleen or?
It was Kathy Kennedy.
It was Kennedy.
And she goes, "Hi, Stephen would like to meet you." I'm like, okay. So, like the next day, I went in and he was doing ET at the time.
So was Amblin on the Universal lot?
No, it was still at Warner Brothers.
It was still at Warner's.
They hadn't built the Amblin at Universal yet.
Okay.
And so I went in and met him, and he couldn't have been nicer. And we talked for like an hour and a half. And
Wow.
he was super nice. And, he asked me what I wanted to do and all. And I left, and the next day I'm sitting in my crappy little apartment in Studio City, and the phone rings. It's Kathy Kennedy again. She goes, "Hi, I'm just calling to tell you that Steven's making arrangements for you to do a feature version of your student film."
Wow.
So I hung up, and I literally just sat in this chair for like 15, 20 minutes, and I picked up the phone, I called her back, and I said, "Could you repeat that?"
Let's make sure this is
She
correct.
just laughed, and he did.
Wow.
And how old were you at the time?
I was 28, something like that.
28. Wow. That's my age right
Yeah, I was really lucky.
now. Wow, that's amazing. So this what was the name of the film? We get into your first
Fandango. Yeah.
Just so people out there know, this is where Fandango came out of.
Yeah.
Fandango. So that's very similar to quite a bit of people. I mean, people like George Lucas, THX 1138. I mean, people. This is what people were doing, right? These high profile, high quality student pictures or short films that were adapted into features. Was that the landscape that you were seeing? Even Steven did that with Amblin and with a couple others.
With his picture Amblin, his little short movie Amblin. And then he went into TV and started doing all that. I think in some ways, it was easier back then because there weren't as many of us trying to do it.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it was
What year was this?
God, this was like 1980, 81.
81, okay.
And so back then, it was such an impossible dream to work in film. Nobody even dared to try it.
Sure.
And so,
and now it's oversaturated.
And now it's oversaturated. Everybody's doing it.
We're in the rat race.
You're
We're
experiencing
here trying to.
It's the race.
Yeah, and it's it's just what's happened to the business in like the 40 years that I've been in it and seen what's happened. Back then, there weren't as many pictures.
Right.
And so when a movie came out, it was a big deal.
8 pictures a year, maybe.
Yeah.
As opposed to now 40.
Now it's like 8 a day.
Yeah.
You can go. I did it. I don't know, a week or two ago. I went on like Rotten Tomatoes on the website, and they'll list all the movies as they come out
And the date.
Every week there must be another 20 movies. Every week, it's like another 20 movies are coming out. Now they're not all as well known, but that's a lot of movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can't possibly see all those.
And just to compete on the storyteller side, on the creative side, who listens? To
and how do you even?
It's almost more about quantity than quality.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the problem. Places like Netflix. I mean, quite frankly, 90% of what they make is garbage.
Exactly.
Now, has that been your experience into this landscape now? Because your last picture, I'm sure you've been in development for a ton of things, and you're just waiting. But you're getting more films in between, less films in between, and then you're finally kind of doing the draw. The last one, I believe, is in 2017.
Yeah.
So
Risen.
Risen. So how's that transition been for you? If you're thinking,
it's not easy. I mean, look, I'm older, and so I'm not the young Turk, that I was like a long time ago. And there's always, that's the thing is, when you break in and it's great and all, and you forget there's a new generation right behind you.
Sure.
Every year there's a new crop of filmmakers coming up. So you're like, you peak and you're on the wane.
But do you feel like you get to a point where now it's a choice? I mean, people, you make enough films, you could probably retire and you could probably slow down. But now, are you just thinking, you know what? I don't know if I want to compete with all of this, or I'm waiting for the right picture to really get back in there, or what do you think?
It's funny. It's really funny because when you're making a picture after about 10 days on the set, you go, I never want to do this again.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my God, get me out of here.
The stress and the headache and everything that all makes
everything is like, God, I just want to sleep for 6 hours.
Sure.
Yeah, I never want to do this again. And then, by the time you finish it and you kind of go, okay, I'm ready for further punishment.
Yeah.
And you do. It's addictive.
Yeah. No,
even now,
absolutely.
I could definitely retire, but I still have stories that I'd like to tell.
I couldn't agree more. So after we just to back it up a bit, we get past Fandango after your first feature.
Right.
What is that? What is that feeling? It's fresh. You're still on the younger side, and what is that feeling to say? Okay, I'm ready for my next picture. I'm ready for my next 3. I don't know.
You're 28. Did that feel like a trial by fire kind of?
It's definitely a trial by fire, and you know, after that one, you're kind of reliant on other people coming to you. You know, and back then, if you have a certain reputation or you're kind of the hot guy, you know, people will come to you and bring you ideas.
What was the reception? Because that will have a lot to do with if you get your next job.
It was not good. Fandango
okay.
did no business at all, and it was very disheartening at the time because, you know, they sort of expected it to be more of a Animal House type thing, and that wasn't the style that I wanted to do.
That's how they were
we were
marketing
talking
it?
about that in there too. It's like I was in a different place in my life, you know,
Sure.
so I wanted to do something that was more coming of age and more soulful.
And that's a lot of your films. That's really the feel that we get from them.
Well, thank you. I mean, I try to, you know, have something to it. It's not just straight comedy or action or whatever. But that's what they'd wanted. And so when it wasn't that, I think, you know, the studio was like disappointed.
I have to tell you, Kevin, personally, this is personally on my test, and I love cinema and I love classic cinema, I love foreign cinema, and I really just dig, you know, sink my teeth into a lot of this. But personally, one of my least favorite eras is the 80s. And because I think there wasn't enough substance in cinema.
You're right.
And there we had the Top Guns, and we had we just had these other pictures that were hitting hard. And we're in a bit of a renaissance of that now because there's just less substance. So do you feel like that's what you were experiencing?
I couldn't agree more. And it's, you know, we were talking about this earlier today too. I'll just give you an example.
No, please.
I was this girl I used to go to cut my hair, and one day she found out I was in the movie business and started talking about it. And so I just said, okay, so like, what movies do you like to go see? And she paused for a second and she goes, I like movies where I don't have to think.
God.
And that's the audience.
Yeah. We were just talking about this not too long ago. We were watching a film, one of the superhero ones, and then he's my cinematographer for most of my pictures, and he says, you know, oh, what was it? What was the film like? Was it something we should check out? He's like, if you want to turn off your brain and look at the pretty colors.
That's what people, you know, that's what people want. Or they'll go, oh, I'm not going to go see anything with subtitles.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to read anything.
Yeah.
No, it's true.
And it's sometimes I feel like there's the films that do so much good for the filmmakers that make it and give us something that we want to live up to and the stories we want to tell, and we can show them to people who it's a general audience. It's not the filmmakers, and that's not what everybody wants. And you're always playing this game of trying to deliver your vision and hoping that it's also going to bleed into it being
Hope it's
successful.
interesting to someone else.
Yeah.
Because it means so much to you. You know, you pour your guts out.
Yeah.
You know, and you hope that somebody will respond to it. And no, they want this shiny, sparkly stuff.
Yeah.
And I say this all the time. We really genuinely do stand on the shoulders of giants. And personally, as a director, I feel responsibility to say, I feel honored to contribute to this form that is cinema. So I better be doing a damn good job and honoring what came before me. Did you feel any type of responsibility?
Hats off to you. I mean, seriously, don't give up because, you know, we need more of that. And hopefully, I say things are cyclical. You know, and even in the movie business, like you said, the 80s were not a great time. We're not in a great time now, but it's cyclical.
Yeah.
Because the 70s, I mean, to me, the 60s and the 70s were just like
me as
best.
well. That's my favorite era of cinema.
It is.
Really, and it's fantastic.
It is. And, you know, and you hope with all the changes that are going on technologically and everything in cinema, you hope that we're going to get back to an era like that. Personally, I think we're going to have to go through a really traumatic time socially before people are able to get back to that kind of storytelling.
You came off the heels of that, though, so I really would like to ask if that's something that you were looking at. I mean, my hero, you know, my cinematic hero is Martin Scorsese, and he came out of that era. And again, the Spielbergs and the Lucases and the Coppolas, they were all just these kids in film schools and saying, the studio system's having a really hard time. We need to step in and really save this. Is that... Were you reading about this? Were you seeing these films and being like, this is what I want to do?
I mean, I was responding to what they were, you know, there were artists that were doing things, and that's what all young artists do. They see what somebody else does, and they respond to it and go, I want to do something like that. So they do their version, you know, and that's how the art advances.
Because Red Dawn does feel like this is what, you know, I want to make a change in this, you know, and spark this back up.
Well, see, the reason I wrote that thing is because at the time, everything in the country was like us versus the Russians. And, you know, it's like, we're going to go to war. And I was like, you're out of your minds, because it's like, and the reason people were doing that is because they didn't realize what it's like to fight a war in your own backyard.
Right.
You know, people in Europe are like, no, we don't want this, because, you know, just 40 years before, they'd had a war fought in their backyard.
Yeah.
And they're like, they knew how horrible it was. And so Americans didn't know it. So I was like, okay, well, what if we did have to fight a war in our own backyards? What would it really be like?
Yeah.
And that's the story I was trying to tell.
Right.
So, yeah, you could say that sort of came out of the times, you know, the social consciousness that I had.
Yeah.
But
cinema is a reflection of life, and vice versa, right? When we ponder
Should
on
be.
life, yeah, it should be. So getting into, I think it's important for our viewers, our listeners, to know how you got over the hump, we could say, of your first picture not doing well, quote unquote, because it's disheartening, but you made a plethora of many pictures after that. So what was the second thing of like, well, got to dust it off, let's keep going? Was it your agent encouraging you? Was it Steven? I don't know, you know.
you just have to put your head down and keep going.
Yeah.
And, you know, a couple of opportunities came along, and unfortunately I got somebody sent me a piece of material, and I was like, wow, this is great.
Okay.
That I wanted to do, and that became my next picture.
Did that scare you to not do something that you hadn't written?
No.
No. You wanted to do that. You were open to do
I
that.
sat down and actually worked on the adaptation with the writer. It was a play.
Okay.
But it was a it was a play called Nanawatai, and it was about a Russian tank crew lost in Afghanistan in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And I read it, and I went, this isn't a play, this is a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sat with the writer, and we adapted it to a screenplay.
Right.
And went off and shot it.
That perspective, now that I'm seeing the through line a little more, you being raised in an army base and having, you know, a father who was in,
Right.
was that informing your storytelling a little? I mean,
Yeah,
just on
it
an
did. I'm
accuracy
sure
front?
it did subconsciously.
Yeah.
I don't remember it consciously.
Sure.
You know, but I'm sure subconsciously it did, you know, because I lived on bases and stuff and saw what went on. But every artist does that,
Yeah.
you know, you sort of bring what you've lived and what you've experienced, and that's what you bring to your work.
Yeah.
And that adds that authenticity to the film.
Yeah.
That when you watch these pictures, you don't feel like it's somebody talking about something that's never happened. Like you're even saying about how the concept of fighting a war in a backyard and really trying to think about how that's going to be here. I mean, those are probably thoughts that were going on in your head from your family and what
They
you
were,
seeing.
because
Yeah.
I had seen, I still remember, you know, Holloman, this was like the late 60s. And I remember one day the 365th Fighter Wing, it was all F-4 Phantoms, they all lined up on the flight line and took off and went to Southeast Asia. And all the families went down to the flight line and watched the dads take off and stuff.
Wow.
And I still remember about a month later, or a month or two later, the moving vans started showing up to move the families off base because dad wasn't coming home.
Wow.
And that's the reality.
Sure.
You know?
Now, I think it's the thing you get asked about a million times. And I'm sure Gaston as an actor wants to hear this too, and fellow actors out there in the relationship between actor and director. You got to make some films with Kevin Costner, naturally, and that was a relationship, obviously. And then, of course, Kevin went off to be a director.
Right.
So, can you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, Waterworld, everything. Just, you know, what was that experience like? What was the first meeting with Kevin like?
Everybody asked me about it. The first time
I know, I'm sorry, but, you
it's
know.
okay. The first time I met Costner was when I was at USC Film School.
Really?
Yeah, and I was making my student film, and you know, actors would come in to be in student films because it was a way for them to get exposure. And he came in and read from my student film
Wow.
for the lead role, and I liked him a lot, but I ended up giving it to another guy.
Okay.
But I called him and I said, you know, look, I thought you were great, but I'm giving the role to this other guy, and he was really gracious and stuff, and I thought he was really good. And then about, I don't know, a couple of years later, when I was making Fandango, and I was casting it, and he came in again. And we talked, and we remembered all that. And he had to read for me again. And literally within the first two lines out of his mouth, I realized he's the guy.
Can we know who the other guy was?
I don't know that he ever really, he was just Mark Schwartz was his name.
Mark Schwartz.
That could have been his movie, huh?
Oh.
That could have been his. I was just saying.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, your first feature, you remembered this actor from film school, and then did you think, I'm going to make multiple pictures with this guy,
No.
or did you think, that's one off?
It's just he had the persona that fit that character.
That character.
It was just right for that role at that time.
It was right for that role at that time.
Awesome. No, that's fantastic. But so what are some of the other experiences? You wrap, obviously, the first picture. you decided to make a few more, and then did you just think of him again? Did he come and read? Did you guys talk about a script?
You know, we were really good friends back then. You know, we spent a lot of time together and like similar material, you know. Then, you know, we continued to try to find something that we maybe could do again together. And one or two things didn't work out, and ultimately I was actually on another project at Universal, and they asked me to come do it. And I bailed on another movie. I was going to go to Australia, and they came and asked me, "Don't go. We want you to do this Universal picture."
Okay.
And I read the script and I went, "This is a $40 million movie." Well, back then that was a lot of money for a picture.
Absolutely.
And they go, "No, it's like 30." And I said, "No, this is a $40 million movie." And they said, "Look, whatever, we're making it. Come." So I bailed on that picture, and I came on board, and I like prepped for like 3 months, and was actually casting and looking at locations and stuff, and they finally came up with a production budget of $39 million.
Right on.
And they went, we're not making it for 39. I said, I told you it was going to be $40 million. And they, yeah, but we're not going to do that. And I was so mad at them. You know, they were like, how do we cut this down and all that? Anyway, this wily producer who, there were two competing Robin Hood projects at the same time. And this wily producer, I guess, found out this was going on. So he turned around and offered me Robin Hood.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And what he knew was not only was I dissatisfied, but Costner was going to do the other Robin Hood project.
Oh, wow.
So when I bailed and took on his Robin Hood project, Kevin bailed on the other Robin Hood project. And that's how we ended up with that Robin Hood.
There's a bit of a loyalty there as well. And and the similar, you know, type of films that you guys wanted to make. Wow, that's amazing. We got a couple more questions. I know you've been giving us a lot of your time, so we appreciate it. But I have to ask, just because, you know, Eric and I were talking about this growing up watching Waterworld a lot. Tell us your experience on that film and what that was.
We don't have
for you.
enough time. You need about a week of podcast for that.
We'll have you back.
What do you want to know?
Well, like the most memorable moments, or maybe like
I guess the biggest challenge.
It was a
towards,
big
like,
picture. And scale.
Challenge,
And,
Well, there are a lot of moments I've tried to suppress, you know, that I try not to remember. I remember there's so many great and awful moments. I remember one day on the atoll, and we're offshore on this giant atoll that's anchored on the bottom of the Pacific, like a mile offshore, and like there are 200 stunt guys on water skis, you know, coming across the water, and there's like a couple hundred extras on this atoll, and there are all these explosions going off, and they come and start circling like Indians around a wagon train. And there's a helicopter overhead, and I've probably got 8 cameras going on, and I'm up on top watching all this, and I just looked around at it all, and I went, this is unbelievable. It's just like this huge circus out on the ocean. And it was just, I had to just take a pause for a moment and realize this doesn't happen.
It's a beautiful moment, right? Like, it's a beautiful moment where you can be on set and be like, oh, this is it.
I created it.
Right? We've had that multiple times where we're just like...
Every project has those special moments where you just have to pause and take it in, because that's what keeps us from getting, like, jaded, right? That's what keeps us, like, loving the... Just storytelling.
And you know it's transitory. It's not going to last, but you're experiencing it right there.
Is what makes it all worth it.
Yeah.
It's a long way from your first, you know, short film, right?
It was.
Now, we always like to kind of wrap up the episode.
I got one more question.
Yeah.
Out of all the films, which one's a hidden gem that you hold close to your heart? That many people might not know, but you're like...
This is my second picture, The Beast.
The Beast.
Nobody's heard of it. And it's a picture that I was telling you about. It was about a Russian tank crew lost in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
With Jason Patrick and George Zenza, and we shot that in Israel with real Russian tanks.
Wow!
And it was a tough picture, but it was. I'm really proud of that movie.
Wow. The Beast.
Yeah, The Beast.
All
Written
right.
by Bill Master-Simone. It was the play. Some places called The Beast of War.
Okay.
Because you know, a lot of people thought it was a horror movie, so they called it The Beast of War. But yeah, I'm very proud of that movie.
That's your hidden gem.
We'll have to check that one out.
Beautiful.
This is your camera right here on the left side.
Oh, yeah.
Can you can either talk to us or talk to camera, but what advice can you give to storytellers? Anybody like writers, directors, producers, actors, cinematographers, what's the perspective you can offer them that say this is... And it can be as real as you want, and you don't have to sugarcoat anything, but what's something you can...
My advice, if you want to get into film and be a storyteller, is you have to have complete and utter confidence in yourself. And you have to believe the odds are against you. I'm not going to lie. We were talking about it in there in the panel. Your chances are like 1 in 100, but you have to believe you're going to be that one.
Yes.
And you cannot give up, and you have to persevere, and you have to work harder than anybody else, and believe it's going to happen to you, because that's the only way it will happen.
That's
Wow,
great. Thank
that's
you.
fantastic
Yes,
advice,
yes.
and something we can take to heart. Man, you heard it here on the TowerCast podcast. We had the amazing Kevin Reynolds just letting us know a lot of stuff. I mean, I could probably sit here and talk with you for hours,
man.
but I know we're wrapping it up. But thank you so much for your time, and we
Yes.
appreciate you giving us this advice and this knowledge. And I know the filmmakers out there are listening.
Well, thank you guys for inviting me, and I hope some of my words do somebody some good.
Absolutely, and I'm sure since you got up, you have a lot of stories to tell. Hopefully, we can work on something together in the future.
Sure, love it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the TowerCast podcast. Stay tuned. We got a lot of more filmmakers that we talked to here at the festival. So thanks so much for tuning in.